Small layout, big fun, on this episode of Toy Train Tips and Tricks. Hello again, this is Mike with another episode of Toy Train Tips and Tricks. And while it's a truism of model railroading that there's never enough room, and we all dream of having a layout the size of the Taj Mahal, we're usually limited to the amount of real estate we have available. But there are many ways that we can maximize the effectiveness of that space. For example, this holiday layout that I've just constructed is only 3 feet by 6 feet. It looks a lot bigger, but 2-train operation in a 3-foot by 6-foot space, and I've done a few tricks along the way to make it look larger than it really is. So let's take a look at how I put this temporary layout together that could also serve as a permanent layout for those who are short on space, and some of the tricks that I use.
The first thing that I needed for my Christmas layout was a foundation that was both stable and temporary. In previous years, the family foosball table fit the bill, but that item has now left the household. Instead, I used 2 plastic folding sawhorses. Then, a surplus sheet of 1/2-inch plywood from a previous project was cut down to 3 by 6 feet to serve as the base. As this is a temporary layout, no fasteners of any kind were used for this portion of the layout. Gravity holds everything together nicely. Then, to serve double duty as both noise reduction and to provide the look of holiday snow, I purchased a pack of styrofoam insulation sheets. This is essentially a 4x8 that had been pre-cut to fit between joists to provide quick insulation. I also had some sheets left over from last year, so I only needed 1 pack, which cost around $12 at Lowe's, but they can be found at other hardware outlets as well. If you're starting from scratch, a second pack is a good idea. I laid out my sheets and used a razor knife to cut them to size, actually about 1 or 2 inches larger than the plywood base so that I could push the foam right up to the wall. As long as nothing heavy is placed on the overhang, this is an easy way to gain a few inches of real estate for your train table. Next came an oval of K-Line's great-looking shadow rail track. First made in the late 1990s, this great-looking track is compatible with regular O-gauge tubular track, but it has lots of added ties and a blackened center rail. It looks great, has excellent electrical continuity when connected, and the plastic ties reduce the noise level of passing trains. It's hard to find these days, but it works great for temporary layouts like this. I could have been finished with the benchwork right here, but over the summer, my wife found a Lionel Christmas passenger platform at a closeout store for $7. As a Christmas item, it doesn't fit well on my regular layout, but most of our Christmas village structures are approximately S-scale, so this large station would really look out of place. Well, to solve the problem, I just had to add a second level to the layout, with larger items on the bottom level and undersized items on the top. I found 2 scrap pieces of plywood that were 6 feet long and, when laid side to side, measured 28.5 inches, just big enough for O27 track. Using the tunnel portals that I had 3D printed a few years back as a guide, I cut risers from scrap 1x3 boards to 8 inches in length. I placed a few risers on the seam between the 2 boards to provide equal support to both, and then arranged the others to spread out the load and to avoid interference with the bottom loop of track. Just to make sure I didn't have a domino effect of falling risers dropping my upper level on my lower, I did use drywall screws to secure the risers in place, a single screw on most of the risers, and 1 screw on each side of the joint where the upper plywood board straddled them. These will be easy to remove at the end of the season and to pack away for next year. Then another layer of styrofoam snow and an oval of O27 track completed the track work on both levels. I wired up both levels, each with its own transformer. Both levels have lock-ons on both the front and the back of the ovals to avoid slow spots on the track. Before moving on, I ran a few test models. I found that I did need to strategically add just a few track screws, particularly on the O27 loop in the curves to keep things from coming apart. But again, these will be easily removable at the end of the season. With the trains running well, it was time to test fit the village structures. Most of our village was purchased at an after-Christmas sale at Kmart some 30 years ago. Many companies make them today, mostly ranging from S scale to about O scale, with most contemporary figures being closer to G scale. The scales can all be used together with a bit of creativity. Once the buildings were laid out, it was time to run the electrical cords. I added a white multi-power strip behind the buildings and ran the cord under the track at the back of the layout, cutting a small area of the styrofoam. Excess cords were tied behind the buildings with small zip ties, and some were hidden by a strip of white duct tape. The rest of the cords were hidden later by snow. Then it was time to rough in the scenery. Most of my scenery consists of scraps of styrofoam and the fluffy so-called buffalo snow. The vertical gap between levels on the front of the layout was first filled in with scraps of styrofoam, with the top edges held in place with white duct tape. Other scraps filled in the gaps around my 2 tunnel portals. On the left side of the layout, the space between levels was set at about 45 degrees to make a hill for my sledding figures. Then I brought out the buffalo snow and some Elmer's-type glue. The buffalo snow can be stretched into long, thin strips or bunched into cotton ball shapes as desired. On the front of the layout, the buffalo snow was added to my vertical styrofoam wall, and just enough glue was added to keep things in place. One scenery tip to remember is that nature has no scale. How big is a rock, for example? Also, our brains often see basic textures and fill in the gaps with what we want to see. On a plain styrofoam wall, the brain easily detects the consistent spacing of the individual beads and calculates the height and depth of the scene. With random tufts of buffalo snow against the same wall, the brain has no consistent reference for size, and it fills in the space with what it considers logical, in this case a slightly sloping hillside. But in fact, the tracks, while separated by 8 inches vertically, are only 1 3/4 inches apart side to side. The randomness of the texture fools our brains into seeing a much greater distance, especially if we add depth by placing smaller scale items on the top and larger on the bottom. This selective compression fools the brain into assuming that the smaller items are farther away. Speaking of selective compression, the same technique is used on my sledding hill. After the random tufts of buffalo snow were glued in place, the largest snow tubers, which are nearly G-scale, were placed in the foreground and at the bottom of the slope. The roughly O-scale tube rider is slightly farther back and higher on the hill, while the smallest HO-size sledders are placed high on the hillside and toward the back of the layout, adding depth to the scene. Tufts of snow also hide seams in the styrofoam, and they help conceal where the layout meets the walls. And of course, clumps of snow hide electrical cords and fill spaces between the buildings. The fun is in adding the people and other small details. The cobblestone roads are commercially available vinyl strips sold at Dollar Tree, Walmart, and elsewhere. Before placing them on the layout, a long soak in hot water will loosen the vinyl and make it easier to place. Then I use just enough glue to hold the corners down. Another method of making the layout seem larger is by dividing your layout into scenic vignettes. Sledders ride down a hillside. Skiers glide down another hill, and one takes a spill. Ice skaters twirl on a frozen pond, actually a Cool Whip lid covered with aluminum foil. Carolers sing in front of the town's large Christmas tree. Boys try to ambush one another with snowballs, and another boy is busy making a group of snowmen. Meanwhile, a girl sits on a bench reading her book, totally oblivious to the passing of trains. By breaking the layout down into these smaller scenes, the mind lingers on the small details and overlooks the relatively small tabletop. To further divide these vignettes, I use trees. Lots and lots of trees, but still not enough. Mine come from Dollar Tree, Walmart, and anywhere else I can find them after Christmas each year. Remember again that nature has no scale, so everything from tiny HO scale trees, which can make a wall of scenic shrubberies, to a giant 8-inch tall town square Christmas tree, and everything in between can be appropriate if placed properly. The figures also come in different scales. My skiers and ice skaters were O-scale figures marketed by Model Power in the late 1990s, but I think Lionel has made the same figures over the years. I also find the figures available at Dollar Tree in recent years are just slightly smaller than O scale, and they work well. The smallest figures on the layout, a group of carolers, were originally miniature tree ornaments. I just cut off the strings and put them on the layout. I keep my eyes open for interesting figures wherever I go. Likewise, the little scenic details come from many places. The lampposts with Christmas wreaths come from, once again, Dollar Tree, along with some of the benches. My annual Christmas display is a great way to share the hobby with the rest of the family. Not only does it bring the trains out of the basement for visitors to see, but friends and family enjoy contributing to the display, gifting figures, trees, and structures that they find while doing their holiday shopping. And with a footprint of only 3 by 6 feet, nearly everyone can find a space for a layout like this. Speaking of which, this layout would make a great start on a more permanent layout for those who are short on space. Just screw things together more permanently, and this layout provides a firm base that is built to last. Instead of Christmas scenery, make it a summer or fall scene. Replace some of the downtown village with downtown businesses or industries. Add a siding or two for more interest. Even on the bottom level, there's plenty of room underneath to hide a few cars on a siding, and the wall of snow can instead be a factory false front. The possibilities are as endless as your imagination. With just a little timber and hardware and a starter set or two, new or used, you can have your own 3-rail empire, and hopefully one that you share with your friends and family.
And there it is. So hopefully you picked up a few ideas that you can use on your layout, and whether large or small, keep those trains running, and we'll catch you next time with more toy train tips and tricks.